Welcome back to Nuclear News, guys. Let's get right into all the news that moved the underlying fundamentals of uranium, uranium miners, and the entire ecosystem. First, let's look at the price action on the week. URNM, Global Uranium Mining ETF, up 0.19%, flat. S&P 500, broader stock market, up 1.8%. Look at the 1 month price action, guys. URNM up almost 10%. The S&P 500 up only about 4%. Again, huge divergence among uranium stocks. Let's get into why this could be the early stages of a uranium bull run, guys. So first, there's this article. We know there's this war going on where Russia's invaded Ukraine. Well, because of that, from Yahoo Finance via Bloomberg, world taps Canada for potash, uranium as a war roils markets. So now people have to move away from Russia and go to Canada, right? So you would think that if they're moving from Russia to Canada, well, the supply is going to increase and the price should eventually stabilize and equalize and not move up as much. But this is massive. North America's largest miner is Canadian company Cameco. The producer told Bloomberg earlier this month in an email that its production plans remain unchanged. They're not going to increase the supply from what they announced in February, which is that they vowed to maintain supply discipline by limiting production at 2 of its key Canadian uranium operations. Cameco also said it is in a very strong position to offer power companies an alternative uranium source and conversion feedstock if sanctions affect Russia's supply. They are affecting Russia's supply. People are moving to Canada, but Cameco refuses to increase its supply, which, as we all know, if demand for Canadian uranium increases, but the supply of Canadian uranium doesn't increase, well, that usually causes a spike in the spot price. And we also know it's going to take time for the other miners to actually put out a meaningful amount of supply. And I know a lot of you guys are invested in Canadian and North American miners. And so these guys will have to get incentivized by a higher price to kick in that supply production. But we've also talked about how it'll take multiple months for them to do that. So again, we're going to be in this very interesting, tight squeeze for uranium assets for the next few months at least. Here's another article relating to this. Cutting nuclear links with Russia may be harder than cutting fossil fuel imports. We know this because Russia is the second biggest supplier of uranium to European nuclear power plants. You can see here, 20% comes from Russia, 19% comes from Kazakhstan, Canada's 18%, Australia 13%, and Niger is 20%. You can't just take out 1/5 of the supply of a commodity that's already in a supply deficit and expect the price not to move, obviously. And so you would think that this isn't just going to blow over. We're going to be stuck in this situation where countries are trying to move away from Russia as fast as possible. It's only going to incentivize them to look elsewhere. Here are the total recoverable resources of uranium by country. You can see Australia is 27.5%, Kazakhstan 15%. Russia only has about 8% of the entire Earth's supply of uranium that's recoverable, Canada 9%. So as the geopolitical dynamics change, people are going to have to move to Australia. Lots of incredibly great companies in Australia. Vimy Resources, Boss Energy, so many great assets trading on the ASX. They should benefit as the world shifts away from Russia. The spot price spikes in the meantime. Australian miners pump, and the Australian uranium industry takes off. Now, we'll see if the Australian regulators choose to support that because the regulation is very high in Australia. But if they don't, then that just causes more uranium price spikes. So moving on, tech billionaires rally around nuclear's energy crisis looms, guys. Look at this. I love following the money when you're investing. You want to do what the smart money, the big money is doing. Well, look at what happened in 2021. Venture funding, so from venture capitalists, Silicon Valley, they're investing in nuclear. Venture funding for startups focused on nuclear energy spiked last year. This is massive. Look at that. $3+ billion of investment from big tech, Silicon Valley. The war galvanized a sentiment which has been building in recent years in the startup world, where billionaires, including Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and Peter Thiel, have opened their wallets to back next generation nuclear companies. Smartest people in the world are doing this. None of the advanced reactor startups has yet produced an operating commercial product, but some believe that the combination of tech advances and a new urgency around ditching fossil fuels could be a catalyst for the sector, which has mostly languished in regulatory purgatory since the 1970s. This is a nuclear renaissance that we're talking about. Speaking on adoption, Dow Chemical, massive multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company, weighs buying nuclear power in low carbon push. The chemical manufacturer's plans to be carbon neutral by 2050 is already one of the world's top users of renewable energy, but the intermittency of wind and solar mean nuclear will become a critical power source, said Dow Chemical's chief executive officer. That statement speaks volumes. Pretty much when you think green, think nuclear, because wind and solar are not enough. So whenever anyone talks about green and green investment and the greenification of things, always think nuclear, because it's literally the only way that you can make any of that happen. We're in a process right now looking at 2 sites in the United States to be an off-taker for a small-scale modular reactor. Nuclear will become another tool in the arsenal to take us to net zero. We need to double down on all forms of energy in this country. If you didn't think we need to do that before Russia, Ukraine, you really think we need to do it now. Now, here's where it gets really exciting, okay? So we talked last week about how right now it feels good, it sounds good to ban imports from Russia, right? Especially uranium, just ban it, get away from that as fast as possible. And so because of this, we see stuff like this popping up that the great John Quake shared on Twitter, guys. A bipartisan companion bill to ban uranium imports from Russia has been introduced by 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, following on the Senate bill launched on March 17th. So they're introducing this bill. It has bipartisan support. Usually bipartisan supports pass much easier than the contentious ones. I'd love to see someone stand in the way of this bill and get the bad press of being called a Russia supporter. But the crazy thing here is that it most likely will pass. It's poised to pass. And let's think about the impacts of that. We showed how Russia provides a massive chunk of uranium supply every year. So if you cut that out, the supply demand deficit gets even bigger. I want to thank John Quakes again for sharing the math behind the supply demand deficit and what it would mean if they do ban Russia's supply. So here's the dynamics in 2022. In 2022, there's 200 million pounds of uranium demand. There's only 135 million pounds of mine supply. There is 25 million pounds of secondary supply, which utilities were relying on. Overfeeding, pretty much banning Russian imports and taking Russian supply off the market, flips that to an additional 20 million pounds of new demand. Uranium supply deficit grows to over 80 million pounds. And so look at how this plays out, guys. This is literally the projection of the supply demand deficit. So when you look at a commodity, supply demand fundamentals are everything. It doesn't get any better than uranium, and the miners are sure to benefit from this, guys. I will end on this quote from Elon Musk saying, "It is very important that Germany does not shut down its nuclear power plants." I think that's totally insane. Well, Elon Musk thinks that's insane. I think the whole world thinks that's insane. It's only a matter of time before they do flip the switch on that and change. And so the nuclear renaissance is here. Whether Germany does or doesn't want to shoot itself in the foot is up to them. But the bottom line is that you could not ask for better fundamentals in a natural resource investment, guys. This discussion is for informational purposes only. Please consult a certified financial planner when making any decisions about investing. And do your own research before making any decisions. Investments are risky, and you can lose lots of money in them.